Alright, once again another deck profile from Legendary Vanguards. This time on my last deck profile when it comes to Legendary Vanguards. This time with Chrono Jet Dragon with the Chrono Icon. Because Chrono Icon reintroduced Chrono Jet once again to the D series, but this time with the fighter icon variation of it, which I did find kind of strange because originally every single deck that they decided to introduce with the fighter icon had alternate grade 3s to ride. But this is actually a very interesting take how they decided to do the fighter icon version when it comes to a stride deck. The first stride deck to have a fighter icon, by the way, because originally when it comes to striding in D series, you are required to have a Crest. But now they completely changed the deck where you are actually required a bit of skills, and also it's no longer copy and paste of the original. So unfortunately you can't use your old gorgeous G series Chrono Jet Dragons for this deck. Everything is now locked to Chrono Icon, which is one major weakness about this deck. But the strong point is that some of the skills are actually better than the original encounter version that we got. But originally I wasn't really planning to build this deck, but considering that I'm a big fan of Chrono Jet and did not build the original one, although I did build the D series when it comes to stride deck set, and I was still kind of tempted considering all the stuff they kind of changed up, I kind of just ended up building the deck as it is, and I just went like, why not, because it is Chrono Jet. And also they reintroduced a new stride just for Chrono Icon. Unlike the encounter version, this deck does have access to all strides, but the encounter one only has access to 3. So there's some ups and downs when it comes to running Chrono Icon, which will be gone over once we get to the deck profile. But anyway, let's just get started with, of course, the ride deck. So here's the starter, Chrono Dran, which you do have to run as it has Chrono Icon, and you can't use the original one, so kind of unfortunate, in which we do use Mazer Gear Dragon, which unlike the original, like I said, no Crest this time. So this time, when you ride on top of a grade 0 Chrono Icon, you can reveal a grade 3 Chrono Icon from your ride deck to draw 2 cards and then choose a card from your hand to put it to the bottom of the deck, which could also be a trigger, so you can end up just shuffling the trigger if you want to and then end up probably flipping it later on. With the other skill where at drop zone, if your Vanguard is a Chrono Icon, while your opponent's Vanguard is at least grade 3, you can put this original copy from your ride deck face up and then choose one of your rear guards and put it to the bottom of the deck, and then superior code that is 1 grade higher than that return unit to the rear guard, aka basically perform time leap without actually binding the rear guard, as they reintroduced time leap in a way where you're just actually returning your rear guard to the bottom of the deck to do the superior call for the grade. But overall it's just basically a ride line card that you just have to run, and unfortunately it has to be Chrono Icon. But either way, you wouldn't even run this in the encounter one, as the encounter one does require the Crest. In which now we go to Smoke Gear Dragon, which when a grade 3 Chrono Icon rides on top of it, you can Soul Blast 1 to search your deck for 1 grade 3 card, reveal it and put it to your hand, with the other skill where on Generation Break 1, while your Vanguard is a Chrono Icon plus 5k power and 5k shield. This is basically an improvement to the original, because not only that it has a rear guard skill, but when riding on top of it with the grade 3, you can search for any grade 3 card, unlike the original, where it has to be a grade 3 unit, which I really wish that you could use this with the encounter ride line, but a bit unfortunate. But anyway, now we go to Chrono Jet Dragon itself. So first off, you can only ride this card while you don't have another Crest that is not the energy generator. So yeah, that's a little bit of a restriction there, but I get why, because they want to keep this as Chrono Icon and not have you put this in the encounter version, in which that this card also lets you stride, and also if your G-Zone has at least 1 face-up card, your whole front row is 5k, but if there's at least 3, plus 10k instead. So basically, instead of having your Crest to let you stride, now it's perform on ability, which does have its ups and downs. Which the main upside is that now you are not required to have the Crest, and the Crest also gives you the extra power, which is now inherited by this, although the Crest does stack. But the main downside is that if a card deletes this skill, you unfortunately have to ride again to be able to stride. So you can't even stride at all because your skill to stride is now deleted. So just keep that in mind. But with the other skill now, wherein you stride on top of it, choose one of your opponent's rear guards and return it to the bottom of the deck. And if you do not return anything, you draw a card. Very nice, because this is an improvement to the original where you no longer need to pay a cost. And even if you don't have anything to return, you also draw a card, which is actually a very huge improvement. And it's also nice that you don't don't have to stride a Chrono Icon on top of it, so you can use your original encounter strides when it comes to this one. With the last skill where in Generation Break 2, when this card attacks, for each Chrono Jet Dragon in your bind zone, this card gives us 5k, and then your opponent cannot call grade 1 cards or higher from hand to Guardian into the end of the battle. So Generation Break 2, you still get your guard restrict, but this time some additional power based on how many Chrono Jets you have bound. And as you can tell, this card doesn't bind any Chrono Jets at all. But you actually combo this with another card for the guard restrict, because when you're on stride, you're not going to be on this unless if you're actually, as you can tell, next stage. Next stage always rewinds back to normal Chrono Jet, and that's how regular Chrono Jet is going to be using the guard restrict. And speaking of needing to be on stride and going back to regular Chrono Jet, if you stride on top of this, you're not going to get the extra power buff, so that is a downside as well compared to the Crest. But at least now Chrono Jet Dragon is just completely free, and the power does stack over time, which does have some upsides. But like I said, there's few ups and downs, mainly that it's now locked to Chrono Icon and the stuff is now on its skill. So you're on stride, you don't get extra power compared to Crest where it's just continuous power, but everything's free, so ups and downs. And then to continue off to the main deck, you run 3 more, not for Persona riding, but it's for actually next stage. Because, like as you could tell from the last skill, Guard Restrict gets more power for every bind, and you can always bind it through other skills. And then to continue off, we go to the Steam Fighter Balif, another remake of Balif, but this time better than the original, because when this card is discarded for stride, and you don't have a copy of this on rearguard, you may call this the rearguard with the grade -2, so it becomes a grade 1 when you superior call it through a stride. And this already is pretty good compared to the original, because the original one only lets you draw a card, which could be any random card, which sometimes you don't even want. So being able to superior call as a grade 1, pretty nice. Although unfortunately, in Generation Break 2, when this card attacks, when your Vanguard's Chrono Icon plus 10k power in battle, so it's a 23k beater only for the Chrono Icon. But first skill is usable with the original, so it is up to you if you want to try doing that. But it also has a last skill where your Vanguard's Chrono Icon plus 10k shield. So use as stride, you do get a plus out of it, but extra bonuses if you're on Chrono Icon. Now normally I would only be running 2 of this, but considering that I am missing 1 copy of Nactogio, that's why this is at 3. But it could have been a 4 of as well for playtesting, but I find 3 as a pretty good number. 2 is also a pretty good number, as you don't technically need to use this too often. And then we go to the 1 Nactogio, because I only have 1 left, which when you discard it for a grade 3 for the ride deck, you get to draw a card, or if you discard it for stride, you can also draw a card. And then also has the main skill while you're at grade 4, or if you have a card from your hand that's grade 4 on place, you can cast 1, draw a card, and choose 2 cards from your drop zone to put the soul, or you can make it become 15k shield if you put on Guardian. It has its uses, but this is mainly designed for mostly grade 4 decks, even for strides. But it's just personal preferences if you really want to keep this here or not. And then finally, the Primal Heart Blaze, because this is the best Regalis piece for the stride, and it has been going up in price because of this deck. And now to the grade 2 lineup. First off, Chrono Icon Upstream Dragon. So this one does have improvements over the original, because this one has the additional ability from Drop Zone. When your at least grade 3 Chrono Icon unit is placed, you can either counterboss 1 or counterboss 3 to call this a rearguard, and yes, you can call this multiple times in a turn, which is also pretty nice. With the other skill where when this card attacks, if your Vanguard is at least a grade 3 Chrono Icon, you may have this card get plus 5k power in battle, and at the end of battle, put this to the bottom of the deck to search your deck for 1 grade 1 Chrono Icon card and call it to back row, and of course shuffle your deck. But if it's the first battle of the turn, while your Vanguard is at least a grade 3, you can call that to the front row instead. So improvement to the original over the fact that not only that it can call itself in the drop zone, but also being able to just call a grade 1 to the front row after this card does the first attack, thus also giving you additional attack. Now the only thing that is a bit restrictive is the Chrono Icon part, and at the moment you are kind of restricted to 2 different targets, although only one of them is actually good to call through this skill. But regardless, this is technically better than the original, because this one has additional abilities to just call itself, and also lets you get additional attack, and also for the fact that it's not Generation Break restricted. Now the original one does have the upside where you can actually call any grade 1 that you wish, while this one has to be Chrono Icon only. So unfortunately for those generics, it does kind of suck to run them in. But the minute they make more Chrono Icon stuff in the future, this is definitely going to be better. But I did originally run 1 copy of the original and run 3 of the new one, but I end up just cutting that one just for the 4th one because I find myself not really even calling any random generic grade 1 anyway. And then to the other Chrono Icon grade 2, we got the Steam Fighter Amber, which kind of surprised me that they actually remade this. But anyway, when placed on rearguard, while your Vanguard's Chrono Icon, you can counterblast 1, draw a card, and your Vanguard's at least grade 3 plus 5 key power as well. With the other skill or Generation Break 1, if your Vanguard's Chrono Icon plus 5 key power, 5k shield, of course activate on your opponent's turn as well. It's kind of nice for some early game draw, and also some extra big beater on its own, and also can be a defensive card, so it's there if you want to use it. This might get cut in the future, but at the moment this is one of the better cards to run, and it's also Chrono Icon, which is why you kind of have to run this right now, and it's not entirely too bad. And into the last of the grade 2s, so first off we got the Aperture of Gear Goat. So this card, since your Vanguard's Gear Dragon, you can Soul Blast 1 to give plus 5k on attack, with the other skill where at the end of this card attacked, while your Vanguard's a Gear Dragon, you can Energy Blast 3 to put this card to the bottom deck, draw a card, and then choose one of your other rear guards, or one card from the bind zone and put it to the bottom deck. It definitely has its uses, especially since you are going to be binding Chrono Jet Dragons, and sometimes you do just want to return those, that's why it can be pretty useful. But also early game attacking plus draw is also pretty nice. And then finally I run the Dual Nation for Stokeia and Dark State. So when placed on rearguard from hand other than during battle, you can either counterblast 1 to look at the top card of your deck to either put it to the drop or put it to the bottom. And then choose a grade 2 card from your drop zone and call it to rearguard, which can be pretty helpful to just to help you recover some of your key pieces. Or you can Energy Blast 3 to look at the top card of your deck to put it at the bottom, or put it to your soul, and choose one of your opponent's rearguards and put it to the soul. And then also gets plus 5k on attack, but your Vanguard also has a clan plus another 5k. It's just here since you have space for generics, that's why I have to run this. At the moment, you don't have any other better Dark State cards to run, other than those that are Gear Chronicle related, if you can actually play them without being locked with Chrono Icon. But this slot could be whatever you kind of wish to be. And now to the grade 1 lineup. So first off, the remake of Steam Breath Dragon, still considered a stride fodder considering that it can still be treated as a grade 0 to 3 for stride, but also when placed on rearguard while your Vanguard's a Chrono Icon, you can form all the following: Counterblast 1, look at top 7 cards of your deck to choose up to 1 grade 3 card from among them and put it to your hand, of course shuffle your deck, but if you fail you countercharge 1, and also if your Vanguard's at least grade 3 plus 5 key power needed a turn. Very useful to search for key grade 3s if you need it, or this could just become the stride fodder if you need it. This might end up getting cut down to 3 in the future, but being able to search for key grade 3s is just pretty nice, that's why you just run this. And right now there's no other better card to run when it comes to the grade 1 lineup, especially for Chrono Icon. And I do suspect if they make any other stride deck fighter icon in the future, this is going to be shared with all the other ones as well. And then to the card that you want to call with upstream, which is the Steam Scar GG. Another remake of GG, but this time with a completely different ability, because when placed on rearguard, while your Vanguard's at least grade 3 Chrono Icon plus 5 key power in turn, which when you combine it with upstream on the first attack, this will become at least 13k, which is pretty nice. With the other skill where at the end of this card attack or boost, if your Vanguard's Chrono Icon and you stride during the turn, you can put this to soul, draw a card. So if you did go first and you couldn't stride, you can of course just use this as an additional attacker. But if during the stride turn, you can get some extra soul and also some extra draw as well. So this card has its uses to be at a 4, just because it just kind of does a lot and it's just your better target when it comes to Chrono Icons. If they make other better grade 1s in the future, hopefully Melon is going to be one of them, this might end up getting cut down, but right now there's no other better Chrono Icons to run, especially when it comes to grade 1 lineup. And then we go to the Gear Parrot, which unfortunately I only have 1 left, hence why it's only 1 copy here. But Gear Parrot, if you have a Gear Dragon Vanguard, it gets all the following. When placed on rearguard, choose 1 card that is normal unit that is not Sentinel from your drop zone or from your bind zone, put it in the bottom deck. And if you did this ability, this card gives us 5 key power in turn. Pretty nice right here, especially to recycle some key units. With the other skill where when put from rearguard to the bottom deck or been bound by a card ability, if your Vanguard's at least grade 3, you can either counterblast 1 or Energy Blast 3 to draw a card and then choose one of your units, gets plus 5 key power in turn. Only problem is that this is not Chrono Icon, so this is most likely not going to get rewound or even bind, compared to the encounter version where this skill is actually consistently activated, but it does have its uses to let you recycle, so that's why I kind of run this card, but I might end up taking this out because it kind of doesn't really make sense to use this just for the recycling. And then finally, for some generic stuff, run clockwise just because you are still discarding stuff, especially when it comes to striding. And then the cat, because you can make access with countercharging or even just shield if you need it. And then 4 PGs, because PGs, this time with Chrono Icon with them. And then I run, of course, the OT, 8 crits, 3 fronts to avoid deck out, and 4 heals, all being Chrono Icon. And now for the G Zone itself. So first off, I am going to be skipping the Fate Rider Dragon along with Chronos Command Dragon because I don't have enough copies to put in the deck. But if you're going to have to pick the extra stride units, I'm definitely going to pick Fate Rider, because at least Fate Rider gives you 1 additional attack. On attack, you can rewind one of your rear guards back to the bottom deck to disappear, call 1 card that is 1 grade higher than that rewind unit, and it gets plus 5 key power for every face-up card in the G Zone if you are going to run extra strides. But because I have the encounter one, they're all in that deck. Chronos Command is also optional if you want to do it. But anyway, to go to the main strides themselves, at least when it comes to Chrono Icon, starting off with Next Stage, because Next Stage is a must play at 4 of, especially in this version. Unlike the encounter version, you can stride this with any card that you discard. The encounter one requires the same card name as your Vanguard. But what makes this card pretty good compared to the original, especially since it only works with Chrono Icon, is that at the end about this card attack the Vanguard, you can counterblast 1, discard a card that has Chrono Icon, and then flip a copy of itself from your G-Zone face up, and then put this card back to the G-Zone face up, and then choose one of your Vanguards that has Chrono Icon to stand it with a drive -2. But then you can bind a copy of Chrono Jet from your hand or drop zone, and then it gets a drive +1 into the end turn. But your G-Zone has at least 3 cards face up, plus 2 drives instead. So basically it's a next stage that could be used as first stride only for Chrono Icon, as you need to discard cards with Chrono Icon. So when it attacks, just like typical next stage, it will just return back to the G-Zone so you could restand your Vanguard. But this time you have access to it as the first stride, but this time your Vanguard gets a 0 drive unless you have a copy of Chrono Jet Dragon to give it at least 1 drive check. And if you use it as a second stride, typically your Chrono Jet will be back at full power with the 2 drive checks. That's essentially what it is. It's now a first stride usable at next stage, which will also give access to your Vanguard's full abilities after when next stage attacks. Only thing is, of course, it's reliant on having extra copies of Chrono Jet to actually give your Chrono Jet the drive checks. Few ups and downs here and there, but to activate your full ability, you can stride this first. But you might not end up really striding this first because it is kind of awkward to stride this first. But another downside is that you have to flip a copy of itself, so you are limited to use this 2 times per game. But luckily it's not in a super high rarity section, so you don't need to spend absurdly a lot of money just for this card alone. But like I said, typical next stage gives you your Vanguard restand after this card attacks, and then your Vanguard has its own guard restrict, but this time with 0 drive checks unless you can bind those Chrono Jets. Second stride will give you your full drive checks back. And then to the other stride, that is the new Chrono Icon one, the return of Mystery Flare Dragon. This is the first remake of Mystery Flare Dragon when it comes to D-Series. And also Chrono's first stride, so I kinda have to say it's kinda fitting. So unlike next stage where you don't need to flip a copy of itself, this one can turn any card in the G-Zone face up, but most of the time you're going to end up flipping itself. Or if you have Chronos Command, you can flip the Chronos Command. And then until the end of your opponent's next turn, you get all these following abilities. So first off, all your front row units gets plus 5 key power. And yes, that also includes your Chrono Jet Dragon when this card returns back. So meaning that you'll be at 18k base, which is very nice right there. But not only that, you choose one of your rear guards and it gets the skill until the end turn. When your Vanguard attacks, stand it. So basically it gives your rear guard 1 additional attack. So depending on circumstances, you might want to strike this first already, because if your Vanguard's going to have 0 drive checks anyway, what's the point of restanding your Vanguard other than for the additional ability that your Vanguard has? Even though this already gives a 5k power buff to your front row anyway, and also defensive power when it comes to the next turn. But the insane part is actually the last section of its skill, where if your G-Zone has at least 5 face-up cards, so aka third stride, until the end turn it gets this skill. At the end while this card attacked, you can discard 4 cards with different grades, aka 0, 1, 2, 3, unless you actually put a grade 4 in the deck, and then you get 1 additional turn. But during that additional turn, you cannot ride or stride. So basically this is the return of Mystery Flare's turn skip ability, but this time not as bad as the original one, because the original one needs to reveal the top 4 cards and they have to be different grades with Counterblast 4. This one is at least free of Counterblast, but you have to have 4 different grades in your hand to be able to play this ability. And discarding 4 cards, it can be a little insane even though you got triple drive from your Vanguard, but you have to pray that they're all 3 different grades with your 4th card in your hand being a different grade, if you actually want to go for it. But it is actually possible to do this turn skip a little bit half consistently at a time, but I wouldn't rely on it too much unless you have no choice but to do it. Most of the time you will finish the game off with next stage, but I do love this remake as it's just bringing back more defensive power and also gives you additional attack, hence why I prefer using this over Fate Rider. But Fate Rider also has uses, but also for the turn skip if you actually can pull it off. And so that's it for this deck profile on my Chrono Jet Dragon Chrono Icon deck. What do you guys think of it? What other cards would you recommend? And what other changes would you make? So far, I'm actually liking the deck as it is. I might still make few changes, at least when it comes to the generic lineup, but overall, a pretty cool reintroduction when it comes to Chrono Jet, especially bringing back Mystery Flare Dragon. I was not entirely expecting them to bring back Mystery Flare Dragon, but I'm kind of glad they did. The only thing I kind of don't like is that the stuff is just heavily restricted to Chrono Icon, and I think it would have been better if they just say Gear Chronicle, unless if it's just restricting just the main deck cards to Chrono Icon, because it would have been nice if the strides could have just worked with the encounter counterpart version of the deck, but oh well. I do like this reimagining, especially with the skill changes, because it is quite different to the original, and I do kind of like that this is basically an imitation of the V version counterpart, where you actually stride through a skill rather than striding through just striding. Although this time you don't ride the grade 4 from the deck, you just actually stride from your G zone. But part of me kind of wish that they did the V series route just to make it a little more unique. But oh well, overall still pretty awesome, and kind of glad I ended up building deck, and hopefully they make more support in the future, because right now what we got is probably not enough. But on that, that's for this, and see y'all next time.